right, folks. I think we're good to go. So thanks everyone for coming. First off, I want to say Happy New Year. Happy Year of the Rooster. Any roosters here? No roosters here. I was hoping someone was. Can I hear your crow? Okay. Anyway, Happy New Year. My name's Rob. I did IPO. We've been doing events in Silicon Valley for a number of years. We hold events multiple times a week from San Jose to San Francisco. We always have a busy calendar of events. I'd like to highlight just two that are coming up. This coming Tuesday, we have a venture capital panel, funding for AI, artificial intelligence startups in 2017. That's up at the College of San Mateo. It's a beautiful venue. We've got a great panel. And we're also looking for AI startups that want to display their stuff on demo tables for the networking portion of the event. Who here is in the AI space? Good. Well, you're welcome to have a table. Anyway, it'll be a great event, and we have another great event that we just announced today, February 13th, Monday, what the Trump presidency means to international entrepreneurs and their visa options. It's kind of a controversial topic, but it's something we think we ought to address, and we have one of the top immigration attorneys on hand to discuss those issues, and that's going to be here at Totality Digital Marketing. So check out all the details on our website, ideipo.com. We were launched officially on February 1st, 2010. At that time, we had no members, no events on our calendar. At this stage, we have over 40,000, actually nearly 50,000 members among all our meetup groups in the Bay Area. We've completed over 1,689 events as of last night. Not yet. By any standard, by any measure, we're the most active, most prolific startup event organization in Silicon Valley, bar none. Now, however, I want to expand on that. If we're the most active, most prolific startup event organization in Silicon Valley, and Silicon Valley is the global center of entrepreneurship and innovation, that would make us the most active, most prolific startup event organization in the world. And that's not an alternative fact. Our mission is to promote entrepreneurship, support entrepreneurs, build community, and provide value in the Silicon Valley startup ecosystem, and to make Silicon Valley great again. Okay. All right, that's enough for the impressions tonight. To that end, we provide content that is practical, actionable, and relevant, stuff that you can actually use to succeed as entrepreneurs. We believe in community because Silicon Valley is an aspirational ecosystem. It attracts people from all over the world who come here to do great things. Who here is not originally from Silicon Valley? Wow. Who was born and raised in Silicon Valley? Just you two? Or you three? Okay. Kind of a lonely crowd there. But it's important for us to provide multiple channels for you to meet people, build relationships, and grow your network, whether you're a native-born person or you just got here last night. We have a regular TGIF mixer, thank God it's Friday, every few weeks at Hyatt Regency Santa Clara. It's hosted by CJ Terrell, one of our team members.
You do that on Monday night, right?
Friday. No. TGIF.
Yeah, I know. You do that on Monday night. That was a joke. Didn't go over.
Keep your day job. Let's hear it for CJ.
We appreciate the humor, though. Hi, everyone. I'm CJ. So, as Rob mentioned, we have what we call these TGF mixers. They are on Fridays, and our next one's going to be this coming. The Friday after, on the 3rd. And what they are really casual ways to get to meet people in the area who are traveling from all around the world, from Japan to Germany to Switzerland, you name it. And they're held at the Hyatt Regency in Santa Clara. I've been doing them for a while. We get great crowds out. And again, they aren't casual, so they're really neat ways to kind of meet people in a different sort of light when you're actually talking with them, getting to know their story, why they came out here, what they're building, and what they're looking to join. So ours on the 3rd is going to be from 8 to 11 p.m. The Hyatt Regency, if you don't know already, is going to be across from Levi's Stadium. Hope to see you there. It is a free event, and I think you'll have a lot of fun. Thanks. Enjoy the event.
With regard to value, it's important that we provide value at each and every one of our events, not just value for your money, which is important because we know lots of entrepreneurs are struggling financially. So we price our events so they're affordable. If you can't afford them, let me know, and we always need volunteers to help us at our events, and we won't have to pay. I don't know if everyone can volunteer, but it's always an option. And we also provide a decent meal at each and every one of our events. Was this meal decent? Yes. Okay, lots of enthusiasm there. Okay, but we try our best. More importantly, though, we want to provide value for your time, which is your most valuable resource. Anyone here getting any younger? Except for that young man in the back. Anyway, when you invest your valuable time to come to our events, we want to make sure that you maximize your ROI. We have a lot of partners that help us do what we do. Law firms, venture capital firms, angel investor groups, incubators, accelerators, colleges, universities, co-working spaces, CPA firms, lots of players in Silicon Valley. Tonight, we're grateful to Ducati Digital Marketing for hosting us at this beautiful venue. Is this a beautiful venue? Yeah. I really like this venue because they have some of the nicest bathrooms of any venue I've ever been to. Seriously. That's not the only reason to come here. They're a great partner. We're honored and privileged to be partnering with them. I want to have Philip, the CEO of Ducati Digital Marketing, to come up and say a few words.
So just briefly, we're a digital marketing firm. We help work with both small and mid-sized companies as well as large corporations. For the bigger corporations, we're really acting as more of a support partner. For the small to mid-sized companies, we're acting more in a strategic capacity. We help them with their web development, with their messaging, putting together their marketing automation tools and integration, a lot of content development. We have a full commercial photography and video studio here, so we're shooting content here. And if anybody has any further questions about that, feel free to talk to me afterwards.
One of our other partners is here tonight. Let's hear it for Mike from CTO 911.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mike from CTO 911. I've been doing CTO consulting here in Silicon Valley for quite a few years. I help entrepreneurs with their technology need. I basically become an in-house partner with you just to develop any technology that you need, particularly in software platform development, enterprise software. Recently, rapid mobile app development. So if you have any need in those areas or need somebody technical to help you on any questions, feel free to talk to me after the event and grab a card from the registration desk. I'll be really happy to talk to you. I currently have a team of different developers, full stack, mobile, DBAs, designers as well. And I was focusing on different technology, some on artificial intelligence, a little bit on computer vision as well. All right. Enjoy the event. Thank you.
So though our local mission is to support entrepreneurs here in Silicon Valley, our greater mission is to democratize entrepreneurship and innovation all around the world. To that end, we have a robust YouTube channel, youtube.com/idea2ipo. We have tons of videos. We've documented many of our events. And this rich content is available on demand, anytime, anywhere, totally free of charge. Whether you're in Sunnyvale, Menlo Park, Maui, Moscow, or Timbuktu. Who's been to Maui? Cool. Who's been to Moscow? Cool. Who's been to Timbuktu? Point being is there's Wi-Fi in all these places. So if you have access to Wi-Fi, you have access to the great content that we try and produce multiple times a week here in Silicon Valley. Our partner in this endeavor is professional videographer Tim Jeggers, one of the top videographers in Silicon Valley. Let's hear it for Tim.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everybody. So I'm Tim. I have been doing the video with Rob for his events for just a little over a year now. I can't believe that much time's gone by. I specialize in event video production. I mostly do weddings and things like this, where people are giving presentations of all different kinds of subject matter. I also do informational video bits, and that's pretty much my whole spiel. Got a lot of other content production I offer as well, so if you got questions, just let me know. And when we get to the end, please hold your questions for the last half hour of the talk, and we'll set a mic stand up in a line so that everyone gets a chance to talk, and then that way I get good audio for the video. And we will post it on YouTube, usually in a week or two, sometimes 3. And yeah, appreciate your time and for coming. Thank you, everybody.
Tim also does weddings and birthdays, so see him if you have one coming up. Well, let's get started with our program. Our featured speaker tonight is one of the top startup and corporate attorneys in all of Silicon Valley. He is passionate about helping startups succeed, and he is a very dynamic speaker. Let's hear it for Stan Lewandowski of K&L Gates.
Thank you so much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will try to be as dynamic as I can be tonight. So just what was mentioned before, if everybody can wait till we finish the official presentation, and then we'll move the mic, then we'll give everybody who has a question a chance to ask that question for the benefit of the people who are going to be listening to the presentation later on. So please hold tight. If you can't, we'll accommodate that as well, so don't worry. My name is Stan Lewandowski, and it's my great pleasure to spend this evening with you, and thank you for taking your time out of your schedules and deciding to spend this evening with all of us and learn more about funding for early stage startups. This is a pretty hot topic, especially in this part of the world where people are saying that money is flowing left and right, and when it really comes to finding the real capital, things become more difficult. And I always tell my people that it's not about looking for money. It's more about first knowing why you need the money, who you should be talking to, and then at the end of the day, you really need to know what instruments you will have to really get the money into your company. But first things first. The whole meeting that we'll have is for your information, for your benefit to learn more. Some of you will leave and say, I learned 10%. Some people will say, I learned 90%. And that's for everybody's benefit to understand the relationship that we are having as of this moment. It's information, so we don't really create any attorney-client relationship right now. That will have to happen at some time in the future. And of course, whatever I say that relates to an institution called IRS and similar agencies, please just read the last part. I'm not going to spend more time on it, but I have to have that on my slides. Very briefly about K&L Gates, the firm that I've been working for over now 10 years. It's one of the biggest law firms on the globe. We are practicing law as a team of lawyers out of 40+ offices on 5 continents, and we work as a fully integrated team. And I'm being asked many, many times to explain what that really means, because once you say that you are one of the largest, people question that and say you only have 2,000 lawyers in those locations. I've heard about other places that have more lawyers. It's not about how many lawyers you have at the end, it's how they work together. So in our case, we are fully integrated, meaning everybody works for the same company, for the same body. We just don't share a name. We have one name and everybody is part of the same organization. So if I have something during this presentation that comes from Taipei, someone just woke up and is really in need of services in Sydney, it's a matter of me going to the car, emailing my colleagues who are working already in Sydney, and they can take care of that matter now, immediately, if this is an existing relationship. So that's the benefit for so many companies that are expanding globally. Some definitely don't need anything other than an office in Palo Alto or San Francisco, and they are happy with that. But many companies, including some of the companies in this room, require global presence, and we do that very well. Who am I? I've been calling myself a startup lawyer for many years. Within the organization, we just have to fit a box, so I'm an emerging growth company lawyer and corporate M&A guy, spending most of my time in Palo Alto, about 75 to 80%, which translates into about 4 days per week I'm in Palo Alto. One day I'm in San Francisco. If I have to go to Taipei, I go to Taipei for 2 weeks and stay there. So I'm not saying that, but if needed, I can be in Sao Paulo in 3 days' time and working on a deal over there. And I just put into the last point that I've got about 100 transactions of that size that we're going to talk about under my belt. That 100, honestly, would have to be multiplied, but this is a safe number just to say more than 100. If we get deeper at one point on a one-on-one deal, you can learn that maybe it's 750 or maybe it's 1,000. I don't really know. 4 topics that I'd like to talk about tonight, so everybody knows what the agenda is. And there will be some pictographs for people who like data. And let me just mention up front, don't take any pictures, don't waste your time. Once you send an email to my email address at the end of this presentation, you will receive a copy within possibly an hour. If not, definitely the same day in PDF, so you have the whole package for you to use at a later time or share with some other colleagues. So we'll talk about the life cycle of a startup, then we'll move and digest a little bit the most recent data about the ecosystem that we are actually living in. So we are not talking about data from 2005 and then make some claims about what the state of the ecosystem really is, then some trends, and then we go to the final point and talk about the vehicles that we use most often between the time when the company is formed and it gets to what I call pre-Series seed financing stage, where we really talk about more complicated documents, and there will be definitely other presentations that will take you from Series A and up. So we'll cover something that's pre-Series A. Now, everybody really has to understand where you are as a CEO or COO of a startup to then have a conversation about what you really need when it comes to the capital financing. So what I have a division of this life cycle into 5 parts. And most of you probably agree that everybody starts with an idea. Whether you work at Google, LinkedIn, or Cisco, one day you say, I'm part of a team where there is 25 people, the managers are going left, my brain is going right, I don't fit into this ecosystem, and I have a solution that really can take things to a different level, but I will never actually take this idea through with this team, and at the end they will claim credit, and I know some people who might be very interested in knowing a little bit more about what I have in my brain, so I'm leaving this company in 5-6 months after some planning and starting my own startup. One thing to remember, which is unrelated to this point in relation to the financing we'll be talking about, because many people after different presentations come to me and say, I'm at that stage, but what should I be looking at in the next 4 or 5 months before I actually leave and say I'm done? What shouldn't I be doing that would then jeopardize my future as a startup founder? My recommendation is very simple. Don't ever use anything that belongs to the company, whether it's a paperclip, pen, legal pad, whatever that is, and try to come up with an idea that's unrelated to the business of the company and the project you are currently working on, because you might be on your own. At the same time, you will still be tied to the project, and this will be then related to what you are working on, and someone else will be claiming IP ownership rights to your, let's say, early stage IP that you will be seeking to protect. So you have that. Proof of concept, MVP. Guy Kawasaki, about 2 years ago, came to one presentation and said, it's not about MVP anymore, it's about MVVP. He just added valuable into the whole acronym, and he is right. There will be no customers for your product or service if you are not providing value. Whatever you are working on, this has to be valuable. So viable, definitely, everybody knows that, but value. Even this time you are spending tonight, it's about value. You say, rather than finding someone and asking one-on-one, I can come, learn as much as I can, go home, do something with this knowledge, but you are looking for value, just like Rob said. Building of the startup then requires capital. Some startups can be built quickly with just insignificant amount of capital. Some require a lot of money, and you know what those startups are. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. Scaling, just imagine Stripe's latest round, 150 million Q4. What are they doing? They are scaling. They are not going to seed investors for $2 million. They are at the scaling level and close a nice round. Maturity and exit, for everybody who is in the startup world and has had a startup for some time, this is a great moment to get to. Whether you've been building your startup for 4 years or 5, sometimes it's only 18 months. And you know about different instances where those successful entrepreneurs then end up on Inc.'s front page or some other pages. But this, again, these are not so common instances. It takes, in many cases, much more than 18 months to build something that's then sold for $1 billion or more. It's an incredible story, but they don't happen too often. Now, so let's switch to the second topic. I want to bring some data so you know where we are. And then we'll analyze this by looking at some diagrams and pictographs. It will allow you to really see the difference and trends. So let's start with 2014. $68 billion is a lot of money, right? Sometimes you just say, wow, it's a lot. And imagine, it's sometimes a deal that's $5 billion. Think about Uber in 2016. That company on its own closed over $5 billion just from one investor in the Middle East. And there were other rounds as well. So you see a trend that we'll discuss in a second when you see actually this graph. In 2016, we ended with about $70 billion in aggregate deal value, and this was the second greatest year after 2015 in the past 11 years. And pretty much we've closed 8.1 thousand VC transactions. Again, these numbers will likely change by probably 200, 300 million because the data is still coming in. So it's as of the 12/31 based on the PitchBook data, but I've seen this change year over year. So now, take a look at this. The numbers are small, but we have 2016, we have 69.1 billion in 2016, so that's 12 months, closing about 3 weeks ago. We've got the 8.1 thousand transactions, and about 7.8 thousand companies received financing, and that's reported. There are many startups that get 800,000, 900,000. You never know about those. They don't report, nobody knows. They are still in stealth mode. There is just a name on the website. So these are the instances where you really find something that's publicly available. And when you look at the trend, 2016 is the second one after 2015 in the amount that was raised. And then when you look at the transactions, you have, take a look at 2012 and 2016. Pretty much when we look at the 7.9 thousand deals and 8.1, we are pretty much at the 2012 level in the number of transactions closed. So there are some sheets, but those graphs really allow you to see where we are going. The theme that there is more money is true, but someone claiming that the money is for everybody and everywhere, that's completely wrong. The next one, because we are going to talk today about early stage startups. And in my vocabulary, that's a startup that really is looking for financing from 0 to about $5 million. That's kind of my own definition of early stage, where we talk about this type of financing before it gets complicated. So you have under 500,000, and this is the number of deals. When you look at under 500,000, between 500 and a million, and then 1 to 5, which is the sweet spot, you see that the majority of the deals were actually between 1 million and 5. And that's true, because that's where we do most of what I call Series seed, junior preferred, things that 10 years ago we would call Series A because someone closed a $3 million round. Now we just say it's kind of a nice Series seed. We'll talk about Series A when we get to a higher number. So when you get the slides at home, you see this in nice color. You will notice that the higher amount raised causes the numbers to go a little bit lower. You have 900,000, 900 transactions for 5 to 10 million, and then 10, 25. That's where some of you probably said that, oh, my colleague's company closed a nice $20 million financing, and the letter associated with that thing was B. In most cases, this will be B, not C or E, but there are also transactions that are happening more and more often, that companies that were valued at 80, 90 million about 3-4 years ago now are undergoing what we call recapitalizations, and they are looking at pre-money of 25, 30 million. So it's a big hit on the existing stockholder base where, let's just assume Series A people 3-4 years ago came and for X number of dollars purchased, for example, 35% of the company. And when you look at the cap after the first closing of the recap deal, they have 2% for what they had at that time. And there are some features that some of you have heard about called pay-to-play that we can talk about at some other play, which is a mechanism incentivizing those investors to put more money. If they don't, then whatever they had before is really diminished to almost nothing. So let's move on to the next one. So this was the number of deals. Now we have median VC round size in million by stage. I'm assuming that this is so sophisticated crowd because we'll be dealing with median, average, and those things. Just as a courtesy, I will say what median is and what the other one average is, which is the arithmetic mean, right? Because the numbers for the same years will look slightly different. So median is, let's just say let's just assume you have 10 numbers from 1 to 10, and finding median will be something in the middle. So in this case, it's easy to see what it is. If we have 10 different numbers from 1 to 1 million, and then we aggregate those numbers, divide by 10, the number is slightly different because that will be the average, and that's why you see the big disproportions. So the angel seed and early VC, let's just close them. And please, if you can see this, the blue line is for angel seed. You can get an idea what we are talking about in millions. So you see it's 2015 and 2016, it's about 750,000 to 950 for angel seed. We move on to early VC, which I said this is the sweet spot. We have now things that are from 2 point something that even go as close as 528, and then we don't have to chat about this today. Later VC, these are the transactions that pick up from 6 and then they continue. It's 10, sometimes it's 15. It really depends on the size. I closed a deal last week, it was a $25 million Series B, so it would nicely fit into this later VC, but we are talking about median, not the highest, the lowest. So that gives you an idea where we are actually as of now. So this was the median. When you compare median for a second, let's just look at angel seed. You have 950,000 for median, and look at the average, the same thing, 1.74 million. Completely different data depending how you look at the numbers. You have still the same number of transactions in this group, but the correlation is much, much different. So in this one, it's 167, 174 for the angel seed, and then goes for early VC up to 10.75. So this is what I mentioned before I showed you those two slides. Look carefully because the differences are huge. And if someone just comes and tells you the average is that big, you might have a completely wrong position when you go and talk to someone who is providing financing, because you will just come and say, I know that the average deal is this much. I expect you to do this. And they say, no, we expect you to get about half of that. And you say, why? Now you know why. Some of you have heard about the companies that I categorize into two groups. The left one is angel and seed group of investors. The right one is early stage. These are transactions that they did that have been reported already in Q4. Some are still going to be reported within the next 2-3 weeks. This is what always happens, but the majority are already out there. And you see that on this left side, 500 startups have done, this team has done 10 transactions in the last quarter. So if you just assume that the year was the same in each quarter, you can safely say, I know that 500 startups probably did between 30 and 40 deals. That's kind of a gut feeling. So if someone says, oh, they definitely did 100, you say, huh, you probably have wrong data. On the other side, again, the biggest player, GV, with 10 deals, and Sequoia Capital with 5. It's probably some of these names are not really known to you at this point, but these are the ones that you should really, when you get the presentation, take a look, and depending on what you are looking for, you should do research. There are nice databases with the names of every single partner in that firm, focus, and those things are extremely cheap. It's about, I use, for example, one subscription for about $300 per year, which gives me every single detail about every single firm that exists in the Valley and is really registered somewhere. So that's this part. Now, when I look at the last 10 years and remember my transactions in 2015, 2005, 6, whatever I'm doing today and saying this is a nice Series Seed round, then it was Series A. Series A is new B. So it's a complete shift in what we are dealing with. And most of you will probably focus the next, if you are starting, you will focus your attention on what's seed, what's Series A, but before you get there, you have to really get the other instruments in place to give you this nice push to get to the discussion about, there is a term sheet on the table. Let's spend more time and talk about that. Now, where does the capital for early stage startups come from? That's a question that many people struggle. They just say, oh, it's VCs, right? And again, VCs, as some of you know, definitely don't really come to a later point in the company's life cycle. And many people have misjudgment that really causes them to lose weeks or sometimes months because they are knocking on somebody's door and they are not being heard because they are knocking at the wrong time. They need to be thinking about who they should visit at that point in time. So this is my own division, how I look at the companies when I have someone coming to my office saying, I just have this idea and I need to finance this. If someone says, I have an online system in mind and I need $1 million now to get the website going and some servers, I just say, you need to really go and get some education on the basics, right? This is not 99 or 2000. This is now a different era where things are cheaper and people expect you to really show up to a presentation somewhere and say, hey, I can show you a demo privately because this is already working. And we are looking at things that don't require 150,000, so money needs to be really spent wisely. But if someone is in a garage, the proverbial garage, and working on a prototype, this is still the incubation stage. They may go to some accelerator, get some space or commercial kitchen, whatever the business might be, and they will use those funds to really buy the equipment, the tools they need, but they don't have them from the provider they are at. And that pretty much where I box the 150,000 as the incubation. The pre-seed, if you pass the incubation, you have something to show, then you can start conversations with people and say, you know what, I need another 300, 400,000 to really get me to a place where I can stand up and say, dear people, I already have something that we can start talking about the pre-seed financing, which is still a very small number. And when you look at the tables at home, you will kind of match those things. They nicely go. And seed, again, 10 years ago, seed would be up to probably 1.5. Now the seed is from million to 5 because I close many transactions. We just have financing for 5 million. We just call it Series Junior Preferred, Series Seed Preferred, Series AA Preferred. Doesn't matter, the nomenclature doesn't matter, but you really need to see where you are in the hierarchy. You don't call it Series A because that's now at a later stage. If you dump yourself into a place where you close 4 million, you call it Series A, that's probably a mistake. Can be fixed, but again, it depends on the companies. So in my business, most of my Series A deals are between 4 and 5 on the low end through 15, and then above that we deal with something more complicated. Series B, in most cases, it's over 15, but there are cases where you do Series B for just 12 million. Again, company-specific set of facts will really help you to understand where you are. And just like I mentioned, if someone closed a financing in the past at 80 or 90 pre, sometimes they have to go much, much lower, and then the complications begin. But that's what we really see very often these days. Now, this is a sweet spot whether someone comes to you and says, I will invest 300,000 because you are early, and we'll be talking about just convertible notes. Sometimes people show up with term sheets. And whether it's a term sheet for convertible debt or for later stage when you are raising 3 million in seed, I want you to understand what this is, because you may spend 1 additional hour yourself with your team negotiating this document, and then everything that follows is so easy. And take this to the bank. If you have a good term sheet which just addresses the main points, not the small ones, your life will be easier when you get to the material terms later, whether it's just a note purchase agreement or Series C document, because you already agreed on something. You can always point to that document and say, we had that settled. Why are you now providing some other mechanism to treat one issue or another one? So, outlines the timetable, and please take this and embed this somewhere deeply in your notes, mental notes. When I say timetable, whenever I represent a startup that needs money, I put very, very aggressive timetable for the deal to close for many reasons. I want to keep the cost of the other side very low, but I also want to avoid waking up and hearing that, hello, today is September 8, 2008, welcome to the world, and my startup was supposed to close financing 2 days later. And we could have done it 2 days prior to that date, for example. And this is all real stories. There are many lawyers in the Valley who will say that event taught them something. So I have one rule. When I have a startup that's on the receiving end, I push hard, and something that the other side says it will take 4 weeks, I try to start with just 2, telling them that we can do this, and this is how we will produce documents to get the money that's crucial for your business much, much faster. And at the same time, you are cutting costs on the other side. So that's double benefit, but requires people sometimes sleep 3 hours, 4 hours, and then rest 3-4 days after you get the money, but you already have it. One item to remember, that most term sheets are non-binding, and you will see language, if you see one at some point, that this is all subject to definitive agreement terms, but some things such as confidentiality, exclusivity, transaction expenses will be binding on people. Some firms say, you know what, if we invest 2-3 weeks of our time and resources, and finally you just say, hey, I will go somewhere else, then this startup will be punished by being obligated to pay the other side, for example, transaction expenses, kind of breakup fee. Even if it's small, some people don't really want to have those expenses incurred if someone is acting in bad faith. So now we got to the big ticket item about what you really have in the arsenal when you start a conversation with someone who says, I like where you are. I see that you have a prototype. Let's talk about what you need, and it will be on you to say, this is what I need, and this is what I'm giving you in exchange. And this is the point where you as a startup founder or co-founder or someone who works on the finance side really needs to be able to elaborate what the company is offering in exchange for someone's cash. Because in most cases, it would be cash pure, whether it's 250,000 from one person, another one, doesn't matter, but that's where your basic knowledge comes in. And then the rest, other people do for you, whether it's your lawyer or finance person who's done this at 3 other startups, and this person knows this left and right. So I want to talk about what you can get from friends, family, and you tell me the rest. It can be funds, if you want to go that way. I will introduce to some of you convertible promissory notes, safes. I will briefly mention KISSes because that's a mechanism that I honestly started seeing within the last 24 months, and I think I've done just a few where the other side investing insisted on having a KISS. Someone just provided them with probably enough information to feel that this is the best mechanism. I don't think so, but that's just a preference. And other options that I will briefly mention will be at the end of the presentation. So let's start with promissory notes. And before I do this, how many people in this room are currently with companies that have been in existence for 5 years or more? Okay. How many are those who are thinking about starting their own company within the next year? And nobody will see you on the tape, so don't worry. Okay. Okay. So that's something valuable to you to really know and plan when it comes to that point. So very briefly, because many of you have heard about convertible notes, but you might be confused, and some people tell me, Stan, I don't really now get an idea. Why do we even have safes, KISSes? We already had notes. What's the difference? So this list of features tells you what we really have in a note. And it always starts with the maturity and interest. Once someone gets you this great message that they will invest 200,000-300,000, they say, what am I going to get? And one response could be very quickly, we are offering convertible promissory notes. And they say, okay, I've done this many times, no problem. They will ask you about what's in those instruments. And then without looking at anything, you just have to say, oh, my note, for example, has 6% interest, which will be rising probably to 8% next year, depending on what happens with the Fed and the general approach. But 8% was very common about 8-9 years ago. We got ourselves now to 4 to 6 in most cases. But soon enough, people will be demanding 8 because they will be getting more from the bank than they are getting today, of course. Then the next one, what happens with my cash that I'm giving you today in the next 18 months? Because you are claiming that you will mature in 18 months. So what happens when the note matures? You say, okay, we know what happens then. I have a problem if I can't really convert the note. And then people will say, okay, so let's discuss this whole conversion mechanism and what am I going to get it? 10 years ago, not too many people talked about something called valuation cap or price cap. Now, if someone talks about the note, it's very unlikely to hear a story that this person will say, no, I don't really care about the valuation cap, I just care about the discount. They will say, I want the better of the two, and please build this into the document. And premium on acquisition, again, 10 years ago, not too many people thought about this. Now, if you see a note without it, it's good for the startup if the other side doesn't want it, but every investor will insist on this one as being built into the document. So this crucial piece, let's assume that the note has 18-month runway. So today, let's just say today is January 1st, 2017. It will mature on June 30th, 2018. And now the note will say, your interest that will be accruing on the note, together with the principal, will be converted into the shares the company will sell to investors in a financing where it raises, let's say, $2 million. And this is all happening automatically. You don't have any ability to stop the process. It's automatic. Then you will say, okay, I understand this, but am I just going to pay the price the investors are paying? And the only benefit to me is the interest that accrued? And that's where the conversation at that point comes about discount valuation cap. So imagine that the investors are now negotiating the term sheet for Series C at, let's just throw a number, let's just say $15 million, pre-money valuation. And you at this early stage say, when it gets to that point, I want my money to convert into preferred equity at a cap of 7 million. Or let's do a discount of 20, and then I take the better deal. Years ago, this didn't really matter too much when it came to conversion. People were making mistakes just by converting all principal and interest at a lower valuation by giving people the equity that the investors were buying, but then someone realized, rightfully so, that there has to be, in those instances where the valuations are different, one for the investors and the lower one for the early investors, that you really have to create kind of another series of that preferred stock, because there were issues with the liquidation preference that not too many people thought about 10 years ago, and then the issue was nicely resolved, and we see this addressed in every single safe by having what you will see standard safe and normal safe. So in this case, you have qualified financing. If you meet the criteria, meaning the company raised $2 million, your cash investment gets converted. What happens if the company does not really get to that point and there might be a problem, right? How do you solve the problem? Some notes that I see don't really address anything other than, oh, there is an amendment clause that says, oh, if there is a problem, then people will meet and amend and everything is fine. But other ones will have several different solutions. You will see one note that will say, if there is no qualified financing before the maturity date, the note gets automatically extended for another 6-month period, and the interest gets increased by 200 basis points. So from your 6, now you have 8. And the new maturity date automatically becomes the 24th month anniversary. So you are safe. You don't have to worry about a problem, a default, potentially a big default, because there is an automatic extension, and this is a good solution. Another one that I see quite a lot, people will say, if I can't really close a qualified financing at this level within 18 months, my company is simply dead, because it has to be alive. I have to have that funding. If I don't, then we failed, and then we don't care. And then you put another mechanism if the investors' council is not going to catch it, and simply say, in that case, all principal and interest gets automatically converted into common at much, much lower valuation. So again, you avoided default. You simply said, sorry, you have worthless common, and we are pretty much closing the shop relatively quickly. And you agree on the valuation cap, which might be, let's just say in our case, we would say we have 7 million for qualified financing. We say, okay, you go to common at 4.5. And the investor says, okay, fine. SAFE. Who has heard about SAFE? Okay. That's an instrument that's not even 10 years old. It's a creation in Silicon Valley that modifies the convertible note to some extent by eliminating some features from it. And those two features are that any SAFE that you pick, and there are 4 different versions that we'll discuss very quickly, don't have maturity and interest rate. So simply, it's an instrument that for your 100,000, you get a document that says this amount, principal amount, because there is no interest, will convert into the next equity security sold by the company. When it happens, the conversion happens. It can be a week from that moment, or it can never happen. And that raises issues too. Some people don't really think about this. They say, oh, it will convert at some point. Sometimes somebody comes and buys the company before the conversion happens. So no debt features, interest in maturity. Is there anyone in the room who could quickly tell me which instrument would be better to have, debt, which is convertible note, or safe, if the company has some liabilities and suddenly it cannot pay its current liabilities and says we'll be shutting down the door, but we have 700,000 in the bank, but that's not enough for us to sustain operations, we need to liquidate. Who would say it would be better to have the note, and who would say it would be better to have a safe in that case? Who is for the note? Who is for the safe? It would be better to have the note because that's debt, and you would be first in the hierarchy. Of course, the first would be banks. Maybe they provided a 200,000 secured line of credit, and it's 180,000 already used, secured by the IP assets, or all the assets in that case. Then the note would take whatever would be left, and safe holders would probably look at nothing if there is nothing left. And of course, people who have stock would definitely see big zero. Now, 4 versions, and the most commonly used that you will see are the first 2. Price cap, discount with no price cap and discount, and MFN clause, which I see if I have 10 safe transactions, I will see half of those in MFN. The majority will be price cap combined with the discount, and people take both of them. So let me talk a little bit more about each of these things because I didn't see too many hands being raised, so let's benefit from this. The first one, price cap and no discount. In other words, price cap is a valuation cap. And you've heard this when I was talking about the notes, that some people will require that there is a valuation cap. They don't want to give you 100,000 and suddenly you tell them, hey, Joe, we are closing a financing, and you know what happened? We've been valued at $150 million. And Joe gets really scared at that point because he knows that his investment means nothing at this point. If Joe had the valuation cap built into his note, it's a different story. So the people who get excited about safes, let's just assume they go for the price cap, no discount. They will say, Stan, it's great that you have this company. We'll invest 100,000, but give us a good valuation cap. And I will say, okay, what about, because that's my 6th month of operations, I filed 1 provisional patent application, 1 trademark. I have 2 people excited to work with me. They left Google. They have enough to survive. Okay, I give you $8 million valuation cap. Oh, they will say, well, what about 7? Okay, it might be 7.5. So we get to 7.5, and a year later, someone else comes and says, we'll fund $5 million, and let's do pre-money valuation of 15. It's a pretty high pre-money valuation for this stage, but let's say it's 15. So my people will get, in this case, 2 times more shares, but because I cannot give them the same shares I have for my big investor, they will get 2 times more, but the investor will get, let's just call it standard seat, and they will get safe. And the price per share will be, let's just say, half for my guys who invested prior to the big investor coming in, and the investor who comes later gets a bigger price, and then the liquidation preference, this is the amount in each document called Certificate of Incorporation or Amended Certificate of Incorporation. This is something that equals to the price someone paid plus any dividend, and sometimes you have, we built this years ago in 2008 or 9. It was very common that, for example, 8% was added on annual basis, which would kind of amount to cumulative dividends, so people would be getting more. But this concept of having 2 valuations and 2 different series of preferred stock now is very firm. No one will really tell you that they will issue you the same series of preferred stock. And the mistake that was made in the past, people just said, oh, it doesn't really matter. You get the same series, or was called, let's say, Series A, and then at the end, the founders really suffered on the economic side when it came to liquidation. So this is what I was mentioning about standard preferred or safe preferred, same or different price per share, because it may happen that the price paid by the investors might be lower than the valuation cap. It happens from time to time when the initial safe is very, very high because someone says, this is not something we'll be putting up with. We are not at 5 or 6, we are 15, and then the investors come at 10, 12. What happens then? Will we have two different series of preferred stock? No, investors and the safe holders would get identical series of preferred stock because there is no need to create something different. Now the second one, discount and no price cap. Let's just quickly assume that the investors are coming for $1 per share and you have a safe built into the term sheet that says, when it comes to the conversion, you will be looking at a 20% discount. How does this translate into the purchase price if the investors are paying $1 per share? Who can tell me what will be used as the price for the safe holders? Absolutely yes. Again, because we are not dealing with interest in safes, we'll be always looking at the principal amount that's divided by the price of standard preferred. In an equity financing, now everybody knows that an equity financing can be something that's $800,000 or $5 million. It's up to the company to decide when it drafts the safe how to define that equity financing, because that will trigger conversion. And in some cases, you see there is no minimum for conversion. In some safes, someone will say the company needs to raise at least $750,000 to trigger conversion. So they want to delay the process a little bit, and it's not uncommon to modify those instruments because in probably 75% of the cases I see, if I'm on the investor side, the safes come in the form that they are available online as open source documents. They are identical. There is nothing other than the name of the company that's changed. And then the story begins with other things that I want you to take home and know, because there are tricks that some people don't really understand and don't really know about, and after you leave today, you will know what they are. So let's quickly talk about the most commonly seen safe instrument in my life, price cap and discount. It's a simple thing. We are telling the investor that when it comes to financing, the investor will get the better of the two. If the price per share is better using the discount, we go with the discount. If it's better using the valuation cap, which is the capped valuation, let's say it's 7 million, we go with that option. And if I would have to make a recommendation now, which of the 4 to use, I would say, why would you really limit yourself to one option when you have 2 available to you, right? MFN, which is most favored nation provision. And this is a provision that's available in the entire legal industry in so many different contracts. SAFE is just one of the examples where it exists, but they are manufacturing deals, supply agreements, things where you say, I'm going to pay you X for each ton of the silicon mined in Canada, but if the price terms change in your deals with other customers in the next 3 years, I want to renegotiate because I sign a deal that's for 5 years. And you say, why would I really box myself? Maybe the spot prices will be better, but they will not sign something shorter. So you try to build something like this and say, but I want a better deal if there is a better deal. And it applies to the safes too. So let's assume you sign a safe that has some terms and this mechanism built at the end. Then you say, dear company, I just learned that you issued safes to somebody and the valuation, for example, is much, much better. I want those terms. And they say, okay, if there is minimum amount for the conversion, for example, let's just say it's $1 million, that's always built into this mechanism, then you will get better terms, and the prior safe is basically canceled, you get a new one. Now, this is where the fun begins. You have a safe, but someone just told you, hey, these guys are in deep discussions with someone and they are going to be purchased. Your safe says it will convert when the company sells equity securities in a financing with $2 million, and you say, this will never happen. Now, what happens? You will have the right to make an election. You will say, what's better for me? Can I get my money back? Okay, fine. Or you can get shares of common stock based on this formula, and then you say, it's better for me to have common stock because I automatically will sell that stock and I get a better benefit in the deal. But what's even better? What about you not just getting an information that something is happening? What about you being in a position to say, I need to say yes to this M&A deal? This is a game changer. And I see slowly and slowly, more and more investors are saying, you are not just selling yourself. If I have this safe in my hand, you come to the majority of the people who bought a series of safes, because in most instances, the board will approve, for example, issuance of 1.5 million worth of safes, and then there will be, if the people are thinking prospectively, they will build this mechanism for their own protection and say, now, come to 751,000 of us, not people, but those who hold this amount, and ask for our consent. Maybe we'll say that this is not a good deal, because we see this company going somewhere else, and you are fast, really going to the exit? Let's wait. Very quickly, what happens if the company liquidates, dissolves before the conversion of the principal amount into stock? Again, this goes back to what I said, who is more interested in having a note, safe, or something else, right? It really depends, because you may get something if there are assets to satisfy your instrument, but you may get zero depending where you are in the hierarchy and what the company has. Now, this is very often asked by people who put even 100,000 into a deal. Because when you look at the safe, there is something that says you will have participation rights as they will be agreed upon in the qualified financing. You might be at a stage where you will have nothing to say. The investors will say, we are putting 5 million in. And for you to have a word, you have to put at least 250. And you say, no, I'm not interested in finding another 150, which I don't have. I want my participation rights based on my 100,000. Sorry. There was some other time for you to think about this. This is the time. And what the smart company will do will say, okay, let's leave the safe the way it is. Let's enter into what we call a side agreement, 2 pages max, that says, I'm putting this 100,000. I want to have the right, for as long as you have safes outstanding and issuing them prior to the qualified financing, that any time you will raise more money, and this will be qualified financing, I want to have at least the right to put 1x of what I invested. So I have the right to put 100,000 plus I want this right to continue for a longer period of time. So it will be an exception when, for example, you see the stock purchase agreement saying everybody who has 250,000 will be major investor, and this term then shows up in investors' rights agreement and other places. This additional person would say, I'm one of those who have better rights because I negotiated them at the early stage because I knew about them. Key documents I mentioned at the beginning that I will just mention to you that they exist. They've been created by 500 startups. That instrument looks very similar to the note. The equity version looks very, very similar to the safe. And when you get the slides, you can quickly look at what those things are. The main thing, which is something I alluded to, the major investor team, because this really happens in so many different types of financing and instruments. when you have someone called a major investor, this person has superior rights to other folks who are just investors, let's call them that way. The main threshold to become a major investor is some monetary threshold, whether it's 250,000 or in some transactions, it could be number of shares, or it could be something that's a combination of the two. And in most cases, it's just a monetary threshold. But in other ones where I have deals where people are very upset with one specific person, they will say, how many shares will this person have? 1,200,000. Okay, let's make the major investor rights from 1.5. And then we eliminate this person's rights, right? So it's, again, it depends where you are, what you need to achieve. And what are the rights? In most cases, it's the rights to information that otherwise people waive and say, okay, I just trust you guys. But these ones would receive, for example, monthly or quarterly financial reports and participation. Again, it's pro rata, but you can build into your document that you will receive the right to participate in future financings. And this is something just to take a look, because I have some companies that have successfully raised money, about 6 or 7 on angel list, but the majority that go there, if they can't really be a featured company with someone like a person known in the valley who will be creating a syndicate and pushing that company forward, it's a platform that's great that it exists, but it will be much better for you to raise money from the people who you have more solid relationships with, rather than with strangers who, you know, you might be successful, but it's difficult. Crowdfunding, Kickstarter, you know how it works. I'm not going to say too much, but there are some companies that actually sell AR and they finance themselves that way. Customer financing, just imagine one company that has got enough interest on Kickstarter to get tons of money into the escrow, but now needs to deliver the product to get the money released from the escrow. What are you going to do? Just think about, is the bank going to give you money? Maybe. But what if you go to a manufacturer or another one and say, listen, I have the money in this escrow. I'm looking for a long-term relationship. You finance the manufacturing of X units. We get them shipped to the customers. We release the money from the escrow. You get paid. We continue the cycle. And next time when I have tons of orders, I already know what you can do, and you help me today. We have a relationship from today forever. And many, many manufacturers, whether it's China or some other country, will say, I like it. And there are agencies in the US that can help on the export side, import-export, that they provide guarantees. So there are many untapped resources. When you really talk to people who do this daily, there is so much that can be found. And don't forget, this is probably the last thing I will say, grants, whether it's NIH or some other agencies, DOE, DOD. There are countless possibilities for you to get non-dilutive capital, even when you are a 6-month-old startup, because you know that your technology is a game changer in something, and you know that, for example, a government will need that technology in certain places, whether it's defense or energy or some other things. And I have clients who have used those resources, and they are extremely successful, which allows them to get to a better place when they go to the investors and say, we are now talking about a $35 million round, but we are talking about pre-money of 100 rather than 10, 15, because the government helped them at the early stage. But again, it's many people just disregard certain agencies as capital providers because it's the government. Believe me, those things exist and should be tapped into if you only can. So thank you so much. We'll move the mic to the front for people who have questions, and I will try to address each question to the best of my ability. So please just give our team a second, and we'll be ready to go.
First of all, let's hear it for Stan.
Thank you so much.
So if you have a question, just kindly walk up to the mic and ask away.
I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about the new crowdfunding laws that are out, specifically 506C and the new regulations CF, and what the temperature is in Silicon Valley towards those instruments.
It's a very good question, very timely one. Probably many of you know that in 2012 we got the Jobs Act approved. And then over the years, certain regulations were being approved one at a time. And what we are now talking about is how to raise money with what we call the use of general solicitation. The instruments that I was talking about, in most cases, are being issued by companies that do not use general solicitation, meaning nobody's advertising in a paper, for example, the Mercury News or the Silicon Valley Business Journal, or on the radio or TV, because you want to go with the financing forward as quickly as you can with, I would say, the less burden that those regulations put on people's daily activities, because the companies have to comply with so much. And I'm being general because every company has different approach to this. But the VCs that I work with, and I work with many of those on the list, simply say, I don't want to have a company that will now show up with a cap table of 150 people and they raised $2 million somewhere. It's again, it's an avenue, but there is so much burden and expense to really comply with the regulations and filing of the documents with the SEC even before you can raise money. So companies don't really like that burden because it has to be bulletproof by lawyers, prepared by lawyers, and then you are raising after you already spent so much money. And again, most of the clientele in the Valley will simply say, it's good that it exists, it's probably going to be used more and more often in the future, but it's, again, from my perspective, it's not the optimal solution. Most companies will really know what they have. They know which doors to knock and get financing. But some that have zero contacts and have some expertise and are able to comply, they can go the other route and then be, let's say, asking the public after proper disclosures are made. But again, they have to have the funds to really get there. Not too many shops will really do that work and say, you get paid when the whole transaction closes.
Hi, my name is Andrew. I'm currently an intern here at Tesla. I'm here for a limited time. I'm from Canada. And I'm just wondering, how hard is it for a Canadian company or a startup to get funding here in the Valley?
It depends who you are talking to and what the technology is. Because if you go, for example, to 500 startups and say that you have a Canadian company and are looking for $100,000, I'm assuming, based on my experiences with other, in this case, European companies, whether they are from France or Switzerland, that this is a very easy process. But we are not talking about million, 2 or 3, right? Because this is not the company that will put that amount of money. But there are companies that will not only invest in US entities. And there are many, many seed funds that do that. They simply say, if you have the quality product or service, then it doesn't matter that you are in Switzerland, Canada, or Chile. But in the majority of instances, it will be required that you form an entity in the US because the fund that will be investing in your business may require that it only invests in corporations located in the US and domiciled in the US. That's why some companies have to do what we call redomesticate to the US and keep maybe a subsidiary in Toronto or Ottawa or Vancouver.
Yes, in applying for government grants, how concerned would you be about having to offer royalty-free licenses to the full federal government? And are there ways of protecting against that?
Again, this will, if you get to a point where the government will say, yes, we are interested, let's just assume it's Department of Energy. You will then get a proposal that will describe the preliminary facts and terms for the engagement with the government, and that's where you can say, I don't really think this is appropriate for our case, et cetera, but talking about this in a vacuum without really seeing what's in the store for your specific company, that's I would say it's a premature exercise at this point. Please.
I'm seeing a lot of surge in investment around the 2030 mandates for the United Nations. Are you involved with anything like that, and can you help me?
Honestly, I have not been involved in this type of activity, but
Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it, but again, if I did at least one deal or got involved, then I would be able to say a little bit more, but now.
HCC just opened up a $10 million fund. I don't work for them, but Singularity University has an accelerator. Oh, sorry, can't hear me. 17 mandates from the United Nations. Look it up.
Excellent, will do. Thank you.
So this question is about structuring a company itself, especially at a pre-seed or seed level funding stage. I want to know whether it should be an LLC or a C Corp or an S Corp for a company that is likely applying for a patent in the next 6 months with 1 or 2 other people contributing to the IP.
The main question I will have for you is this. Will this company seek investment from the investors big time or only 50,000 or 100,000?
Okay. So,
No, just that would be a question for you.
right.
If you tell me that we are going to look for 500 million, then you can start with an LLC. But when the investors come, one of the requirements will be that this LLC is converted into a corporation, whether through a conversion mechanism, if there is optimal situation for this, or through a merger.
Okay.
So now, something that you are saving maybe at the formation stage, there is no savings. To form a company that's called an LLC or a corporation, the cost is the same, especially when you have 1 or 2 or 3 people who are the founders. Why would you really put a price tag of 10,000 to do the conversion when things get complicated, or a merger, because now you know that you have to have a C corporation, because there are not too many funds that will even discuss an investment into an LLC. There are some companies that have, for example, strategic funds next to them. Let's just say, without this being true, let's just say 3M will have its venture arm. They may invest into an LLC because that's not true ventures. It's a different approach they take. But I would not recommend, unless there is something special, that you start with an LLC, knowing that in the next few months you will be looking for bigger, significant financing, because it's just waste of your resources.
Okay, and what if the plan is to not really scale big time, but just keep it small in a very niche area, maybe build it to like $10 or $15 million in revenue and keep it that way?
Again, if you are not going to go for financing from third parties, you may be fine with an LLC, because you will nicely have 3 founders. You will split the revenue, the loss and profits, maybe 40-40-20 or 33-33-34, depending on what the involvement is or what the agreement is. But if, for example, the 3 of you have the ability to have an S corporation, at the end of the day, you would nicely apply for an S status and have the benefits of the pass-through to the stockholders anyway. So again, those are the instances where you really have to sit down with someone who does this daily, not someone who just reads books about those things, and say, these are the facts, these are our goals. This person is from India, this one is from Poland, this one is from Germany. All of us have green cards. All of us have X, Y, Z. These are our plans. This is what we want. What's the best? And this person will tell you, under these circumstances and the goals that you have, it's an S corporation. The second person will evaluate this and either agree or say, because of these factors, I think an LLC is better. Again, you might go to 3 different people and you may get the same set of responses, or you may get 3 different responses. Again, it depends on a perspective, but certain things are fixed, so you should not be getting responses that are different on certain items in this package.
Okay. So it all depends on the comfort levels of the founders. Is that what it is?
A lot depends on what we call, there was a slide number 2 about this, on optimization of certain things. And that's why you get the advice of lawyers, sometimes lawyers and accountants, to make sure that your structure holds water from day one, that you don't create something that a year later you have to restructure and pay a lot of money to do so, because now someone who is more experienced tells you that it should have been B and you are still in A.
Right, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I got an MVP and I need to find angels to invest. Where do I find them? I don't need an incubator, but how do I go find angels?
What I tell my clients, I, for example, connect my clients with some angels, but the best avenue for you to really get into the ecosystem, if you've never done it, I would suggest you go to events that are sometimes called pitch nights events, where you have industry-specific VCs or angel groups or early VCs sitting on a panel, let's say 2 or 3 of them, and you know that your idea, maybe you've passed the idea stage, you have a patent pending or something is going on. You go to an event knowing that there is 3 people interested in this space, investing in this space. Just like Rob mentioned, next week he has an event in San Mateo. It will be AI. If your startup is on AI, you should be there, and you should take a co-founder, join you, so both of you learn, and then do a debrief after you come back and say, you talked to this lady who was number 3 because she didn't talk to me, she didn't have time. Because these people are always busy. They are interested in technologies, but they will not have time for everybody. So take 2 prospective co-founders and say, I take the left one, you the middle one, and you the third one. We debrief after the fact, and everybody is happy because you all are contributing and learning at the same time. But you also learn about the industry. So that's where I would go, and I would go to 1 pitch every week. And I would prepare, I would know about these people, what they do, and then once you have a startup that's viable, that you think, based on what these guys were presenting, you have something that you can really stand up and say, I'm proud to say that I have this. Then you approach these guys one at a time and see what happens. But that's the preliminary thing. You cannot just be called and say, hey, connect me with people. It doesn't work that way. You're welcome.
This is somewhat related to the previous gentleman's question. Let's say you have a consulting business and you've formed an LLC to do that, and then you end up developing software by helping clients and then eventually want to spin that off into a product or a company. Does it make sense to, since you've initially formed an LLC, to maybe incorporate a new company for that product, let's say a C Corp that people will be happier to invest in, but still retain the LLC to maybe invest privately into that entity? Is that something that is too complicated, or is there a better way to do that?
In Silicon Valley, there are no things that are too complicated. If they are, then you are talking to probably the wrong set of people, because everything can be fixed or redesigned. And if you have a company that provides services of some sort, first for your customers, in most cases you will not be the owner of the IP. Sans the exclusion for the background IP, where you say, I need to use this and I give you a license, and then I give you this core technology that's yours because it was developed just for you, but I use certain things that I need to keep using for other clients. But back to your question, whether you can have a company that will then be used to invest in other entities, there is no problem with that. Most people who are, let's say, solos in this angel world, and they say, I'm investing, most of them will not invest as Joe D or Joe Doe. They will have an LLC, call it something Ventures LLC. So it's nicely sitting in one vehicle rather than under someone's name, just for many reasons.
Okay, so it's not a deal breaker.
I always enjoy those questions.
Hi, thank you for your informative, actually, presentation. I have a question about the process of evaluation. So if you go to an angel investor or VC, how the evaluation of your company happens, or what kind of patent, or what is the valuable, and how they define it? Because I might believe that this is $100 million of valuation, and they say 5 million. So how this happens? You know, that's my question. First question.
The first thing, it's a very good question. It really depends what stage your company is at, right? If you are going to file a provisional, and this is the 3rd month of the company's existence, and you show up somewhere and say, it should really say that the valuation cap is 70 million, they will send you to a doctor, right? Unless you have something that they will just sit down and say, okay, how wasn't this invented before? But in most cases, the valuations will be based on the comps that people are using from other deals, whether it's you or the investors themselves. They have seen hundreds of companies doing certain things. They know what they did in deal 55, 60, and I'm talking about small deals because you saw that against the public perception that there is money everywhere. You didn't see someone did 100 deals, 200 deals. You saw 10, 5, 6 in the last quarter. So these are very selective decisions and selective protocols that are being applied for someone to be that success story after 100 or 200 other startups were knocking on the same door and left with nothing, right? So you will be questioned why you are saying you are at 12 million. It's not that they will just say, it's 5. The question number 1 will be, why do you think that 12 should be in section 2? And you have to defend this. And if you have some research that says, oh, I know that these 6 companies got investment at this level, and it appears to be a reasonable number, you will be fine. If you come out of nowhere and have the right number, that's fine. But if you don't really have an explanation for the wrong number, that's a bad story. It can't just be because I think I'm worth that much. Because at this time, you will have 0 revenues. It's all just prospective things.
Yeah.
And you have to be matched with something that's easily comparable to other pieces. And you may have less information available to you than the investors do because they do this more often.
So do you think like kind of addressable market or those kind of things are important to support the claim of the value of company, or they're mostly looking at the similar technology or similar investments that they had before and they decide about in that way?
If you go to different pitch events, you will see from time to time an investor representative will stand up and say, I do not like when someone shows up in front of me and says that TAM is in accordance with what I found that Gartner said 2 months ago, X billion of dollars. They say, who are you now? It just doesn't really translate that you will be somewhere else. And they don't really like those big numbers being thrown. You know what? If we only get this 5% of this big market that's from here to the sky, they say, this is not the conversation we want to have, right? So market is definitely very important. If you can show that there is a big market and there is no other entrance in that market right now, and if you get the capital, you have the team to scale and be the first one, that's awesome. But in many cases, people say, the market is huge, but we'll get that much and we'll be still successful. This is not, in most cases, the conversation that's going to be ending very well, right? But you should know what the market is, at least based on some criteria. If you don't know that, then you will be just caught that you don't have enough research done on your market. So,
cool, thank you very much. I have another question that you're suggesting to go to pitch events and pitch your idea and or the stage of the company and those kind of things. How do you? It's not a concern, but at the same time, something like when you talk about your startup in the early stage, in front of like 100 people, and how do you protect your idea or startup in front of? Is it how do you balance the protection and presentation of what you're doing? What's your opinion? Is it which one is important, or don't care, just go and talk, or no, don't talk to anybody? How do you do that?
Most people who are knowledgeable about the subject that you just mentioned will say this: don't go anywhere and don't talk to anyone in public until, for example, you file the provisional patent protecting your invention. You cannot just go to a pitch night event and start describing the technology where at the same time you are talking to someone who will be protecting the technology maybe 2 days from that moment. They don't have to work, it's done. It's prior art, it's already out there. And I suggest that you get the protection first so you have something to talk about. And then before you start talking to the public at large, it's almost never going to be public at large, because if you go to different pitches, those companies are pre-selected, and it's for educational purposes in most cases, just like the one I did last week. Yeah, the companies were pitching, getting good feedback, but there was no discussion that I need from you now $1 million. It was more about, if I like this, okay, we'll set up a meeting next week, just like it happened with one of the startups. One of the panelists said, we can talk, I see something, we should continue this, but not in this venue, somewhere else, so it's private, it's then confidential, it's just one-on-one rather than the whole world is learning what's going on, because the idea is to say what you want to solve, for example, but now you are not really revealing the secret sauce. That would be a big mistake. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Laura. I have a question. We have a enterprise software company, and we sell to large companies, and we have a patent and revenue, of course. And we are planning to do a buyout. So my question to you is, what are the preferred tools or methodologies to plan this buyout without really paying cash upfront, if there is any, or portions? I've heard warrants are a good alternatives, but
if I had warrants, I would not be that keen to really continue the conversation. Warrants are instruments that give you or somebody just an option to purchase securities at an exercise price, or there's net exercise mechanism, but I don't think you will go that far. And who are you trying to buy out?
well, I'm part of the founding team,
Okay.
but we are trying to buy out the existing investors. I mean, small investors, and I'm pretty much create a new team, so starting from like scratch again.
So
Not scratch, but
first someone will have to go through, because you already have investors, to the financing documents just to see what the investors get if there is a liquidation event. And there will be a liquidation event described in the charter, which is the certificate, maybe in your case if you are a Delaware company. And then calculate what they would get based on today's data. Let's just assume the company gets liquidated today. You say, okay, if we were liquidating, meaning we will just distribute the company to everybody who is a stockholder, you say, okay, they have 1.25 preference, for example. They get the purchase price and 25 basis points, or 25% of the purchase price they paid on top of what they paid, plus dividends, and see what that number is. And then you really have to go to them when you are ready, when the board decides, you know what, we can offer them 4x for the investment. Let's just assume they invested $5 million. You say, hey, you know what, we don't intend to have an exit with this company during the life of your fund. We would like to give you 4x for your investment, and you are disappearing within the next 3 weeks because now we have revenue, et cetera, et cetera. And don't count that will be sold or acquired by somebody, because we don't care about that, right? So you have some data that's solid. You say, we calculated this based on this set of assumptions, and you go one step further, change the formula, say, what happens if the numbers, again, change, so they are greater for them, and they will present their own numbers, say, comparable companies have seen exits at this level, the majority right there fit this formula. So it's 6.5. If you are doing this, we can talk. So it's going to be data-driven, because they will also have many comps for their calculation. And buying somebody out is not a big thing. What's the most important piece? how much do you pay them? That's because buying warrants just have zero. If someone has equity, the warrants are just a non-starter because they have no application in this case, right? If someone has equity, you need to really pay them best cash. And the matter is now, what's the multiple? And if they say yes, to document that, it's very simple. It can be a day of work and it's done. It's a matter of getting them to a point where they say, yes, we are fine.
Good, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, so let's say now you have a prototype, let's say an app, and you just registered your company. What are the first steps to do? Is it to protect the app, the product? Is it the first steps to take?
If you are already on your own, then I would suggest you form that company. So you have an entity that now will be dealing with every single item related to that startup, whether it's going to be looking for $25,000 from your uncle somewhere in Vancouver or something else. You have the entity. You get the 25,000. You have, for some developers somewhere, to do some work, and you spend a few $1,000 to get the first provisional patent application on file if that technology can be patented. And at that point, you will be looking for more capital because you spend the 25. But you have already something that you can show. I have a pending patent application that has some value. Nobody knows what's inside because you are not going to reveal the substance, and it's just going to be sitting with the USPTO for the first 12 months. And then you need money for non-provisional one, which will be later. You need to upgrade that patent to a better shape. But at the same time, you need capital to really pay for your time. If you are in a place that you can't really support yourself, you have to get some capital to pay for your, let's say, very low salary, but it has to be in place. And whoever is going to work with you, chances are they will also require something, not just sweat equity, because that might not necessarily be also illegal thing. So many people disregard the employment side of things, but things like minimum wage things also apply to founders and co-founders and stuff. So there are a few things you have to really think about, but start with the company, it's cheap, and start aggregating the assets already. So when you stand up at some event and you are being asked at that point, so do you have a company? Yes, I have a company, and the company has already one patent that I'm the inventor of. I already assign it to the company, and you start the conversation. You look legit rather than, I still don't really know how to do it.
My name is Payman. I have a question. How do you define which phase of the investment in a startup can be once the product is, the POC is done, the product is ready, but ready just to prove that it's working with one or two customers? And from now on, you need the investment to actually scale the business and the product, but mostly the product that match to the business, scaling the business. Are we still on the first round, second round? I mean, not the round, but from the, how can we say that, how can we see ourselves in front of the investor? Which phase we are?
You will be the best one to say exactly where you are, because you will be showing up in front of some people and saying where you are. So you need to know that, for example, you've gone through the beta stage and you are ready to the next level, right? You will be the one telling the investor. The investor will just say, I read your summary. It's interesting to me, and they will not expect to hear now things that are different from that summary, because they already invited you to come based on this one-pager. In the meantime, they said, send me a 10-page deck so I can get a little bit deeper into where you are. But you have to be able to say, I have a product, I have maybe test runs with 7, 8 customers. All of them are very satisfied. Now I need more capital because I use my wife's and my family money and my co-founder's money. We need to scale, and we believe that to scale and maybe break even, we need X. And then you have to support all of that. And once you do that, then they will say, okay, we are interested in it, or come at a later time. But that's, again, those conversations will be one-on-one based on the facts of your specific case, your startup. Your case is your startup, not some imaginary now body somewhere else.
Because it's always this projection that in some service you can go so fast.
Don't put too much emphasis on the projections. This is not Europe. This is not that they want 5 years of projections and God forbid you miss the one in 2021. It's a different approach. This is Silicon Valley, right? People are looking at things as an evolving set of mechanisms. When you talk to Kawasaki, and he will say, 10 years ago I said everybody should have a business plan. Talk to him today, he will say, that's not applicable today. We don't even want a business plan. It's a waste of your time. Show us something else. Show us progress. Show us traction. So it's, again, you have to monitor what's happening and be kind of an active member of what you are doing tonight. It's a great thing. You are learning. You are talking to others. You are meeting other people who are sharing some ideas. But you will be dealing with your company, your advisor, your investors in a completely different way and fashion than your neighbor who has a startup in the restaurant business. And again, his needs will be completely different than yours, even though you started exactly the same day, because you are in the different space. You have different customers, you have different needs, and all of that has to be addressed, especially for you. It's that kind of mindset has to be in place.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, let's give it up for Stan.
Thanks so much.